Well, I really like the name of the Time Party. It says that the time is now. The time is now to change. This is not about long-standing, deep-seated schisms in our society between right and left. We deliberately position ourselves outside of that discussion. Many of Time Party's policies could be considered to be rather left-wing. Many of our policies could be considered to be rather right-wing. We certainly don't think that we sit in the centre. We don't understand that language. We don't think it means anything. And therefore, to choose a party name which deliberately steps aside from all of that, I believe is absolutely critical. And so the people we're appealing to, I would probably describe as the silent majority. The people who have been forgotten by politicians. There's a noisy left, there's a noisy right. My suspicion is that they probably in each case only represent 5% of the electorate, and therefore that means there's 90% of the electorate who aren't heard, aren't listened to, their voices and their views are not represented, and we want to appeal to the silent majority. It's a very good question why not just Time, but all of the smaller parties, some people call them alternate parties, micro parties, aren't getting a look in. And there's an element of normal journalistic practice that it's not necessarily particularly newsworthy until something happens. Similarly, there is almost a conspiracy within the MSM, mainstream media, or as I heard it recently, the mainstream media, of simply focusing on woke agendas and things that serve themselves. So I don't believe that the profile of Time or of any other smaller party is fairly represented. We've also had a torrid time, frankly. The whole resurgence or surgence of Brexit Party, followed by to win the 2016 referendum, the agonising warfare, frankly, within Parliament to try and oppose that and overturn it, the battles to get Brexit done effectively in the end, have skewed every single agenda and every single news headline for the last 3-4 years. We have tried, and yet the audience hasn't been there, but I think there's been a complete sea change since December 2019. People have realised that it is happening, whilst there are still a rearguard action being fought in overt and covert terms by the Remainers. The progress of Brexit is now no longer in doubt, especially having passed the end of June. And there is an anger which in the British public, in that silent majority, which is still not being recognised. It hasn't gone away, just simply because Brexit referendum was won and eventually Brexit's being delivered. That anger is very deep-seated. I have never seen the levels of anxiety, anger, frustration within the normal Great British public as we have now. I think it's completely unprecedented in the last 5, 10, even 20 years. And the time now is for the Time Party to strike, to get that notoriety, to get that profile. And there are people listening. We have seen a noticeable pickup in interest during the course of the first half of this year, in interest in Time. And many, many people, quite frankly, are homeless. They have said in many, many cases, well, I didn't really want to vote Tory, but I had to. Well, I didn't really want to vote Lib Dems, but I had to. I didn't really want to vote Labour, but I had to. We are now giving them a real choice. It's not just voting for whoever might get past that post. It's about voting for people who are really going to listen to you, really going to shake things up, and really create meaningful, effective reform. It's interesting you use the word legitimate. I, frankly, without wishing to be difficult, would challenge the notion that our mainstream parties are legitimate. They may have won the votes because they've had a limited and skewed choice in the various areas. But I don't see that grants them legitimacy. Legitimacy comes from the people. And however people may have voted, they don't really approve of whoever has been elected. You can see that in the opinion polls. There may be a particular surge around election time, but generally everybody is critical. So excuse me, challenging that notion of legitimacy. I think that we will see that legitimacy for the Time Party build with the support that gets built. We are now going to become a lot more vocal and a lot more visible than we have been, simply because it's a question of striking at the right time. I say we have seen considerable interest build in the first half of the year. You will see us standing in elections, whether those are council elections. Certainly if there's a by-election coming up, we will think very seriously about contesting that. We're not just going to contest it for the sake of it, but we will find a suitable, appropriate candidate and we will contest it. And I think the other thing to say is policies. The policies of all of the established, legitimate, mainstream parties are tired, unimaginative, hardly containing any meaningful reform. It's all sticking plaster type stuff. Time Party is committed to groundbreaking reform, fresh thinking, and fundamental reform wherever it's necessary, regardless of what the civil service says, regardless of what traditions might say. We're going to come up with, and we have already, if you look on our website, very sensible, balanced policies. And I think that when you see Time Party standing in elections and people see the quality of the policy and the quality of the advocacy for that policy, I think you will see a fundamental sea change, as we have seen in many environments recently. Well, it's inevitable in a system like we have at the moment for first past the post that if you have more parties standing, then that is going to dilute the share of the vote potentially. Equally, I don't see it as splitting the vote, because we are now past that period where it was of multi-generational importance to take certain decisions. We decided not to stand in December 2019 exactly out of respect and understanding of that principle. We were not going to split the vote at a time when, frankly, the fate of the UK for the next 20, 30, 50 years was at stake. So we stood back. We understand that clearly. We've passed that point. People now want change. They don't want more of the same. They want something different. And I don't think it'll be a question of splitting the vote. It'll be a question of Time Party winning a seat.